some of the stuff is frankly hard to see. I won't deny that, but it's worthwhile from the standpoint of just awareness as well as discernment about what's going on. And so we're going to watch that for a couple of weeks, watch part of it, discussion, watch another part of it, discussion, and just have a chance to think through some of those things. And so that'll be the next couple of weeks. And then right after that, then we'll finish up Matthew chapter 6 and then on to 7 in the weeks following that. So that's the plan for the next few weeks. I think that brings us up to speed. Let's read through the end of the chapter now. You can follow along. I'm going to read from 19 down through 34. And then we'll study this. This is Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6:19. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body, so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Therefore, I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. All right. Both sections, both tonight that we're going to look at here, just 6 verses, but it's a lot. And then the next section is a lot, I understand. If you remember, I said to you last week, that last section in Matthew 6 that's in your booklet, it covers 2 pages. So as you go to study that in a couple of weeks, don't forget there's another verse on the back, on the next page. So all of that's going together for our one study. But tonight we need to talk about this whole thing about treasures on earth and treasures in heaven and serving God and money and this whole section of why this is here. Now, what I want to do is I want to break this into some sections for us to talk about. I want to show you a little bit about maybe some words and why Jesus is saying this the way he is, and help you get a sense of how all these things fit together. Now, just for the sake of conversation, I want to just say we need to study the first 3 verses as one unit. We need to study the next 2 verses as one unit. And then we need to study the last verse as one unit. I think if you looked at this, if you just glanced at this, that's probably how you would break this up, right? There's this first thing about where the treasure is, the heart is also. Then there's this next thing about the eye being the lamp of the body. And maybe we might say that's maybe the hardest part to kind of get your mind around. What does he mean by that exactly? And then there's that last verse, verse 24, 2 masters, God and money, and how we understand that. The 4th section that I want to bring up as we talk about this is just the context of where we are. If we asked and answered our who, what, when, where, why questions, we would say this is Jesus speaking, recorded by the Apostle Matthew, superintended and preserved by the Holy Spirit, who, also speaking to primarily the apostles, the disciples, other followers of his, and the Pharisees, all in Galilee on a hillside, Early in his ministry, all these things true? Yeah? Am I missing any that are important to remember? Can't think of any? Okay. Also, remember that we're in the middle of this Sermon on the Mount there in Galilee, where Jesus has been speaking not just to the disciples and how they are to live, but also correcting things that they would have heard. And in some sense, he's indirectly correcting the Pharisees who would have been standing there, many of them listening to him preach. And primarily what he's been dealing with are matters of the heart. When you pray, when you give to the needy, when you fast, don't do these things so that people can see them. Don't do these things for the praise of men. Do these things for the sake of your relationship with your Father. Contextually, that's pretty much where we're at here. Now, I'll just say that's very, very important because this section follows along in that exact same theme that Jesus is dealing with, okay? Now, let's look at a few words here and talk about this. And maybe let's just do all the words quickly, and then I'll show you how we connect some of these things together, okay? I'll let you guys do this like I try to do, and then sometimes I cut you off. Let's go through 19 through 21. Let's do our important words in those 3 verses. Go.
Treasures.
Very good.
Heart.
All right, I'm going to try to do this the appropriate way. I should have done the other color, but okay. Ready?
Eyes and
Hold on, look.
body.
Is that?
It's not red.
I know I said I should have chose the other color. She said it's not red. Okay, hold on, Julie. You said this right. So you said heart here.
Yeah.
Then you said eye.
Eye,
Very good.
body.
Body. Very good. Very good. What else?
Light.
I'm going to use yellow for light. I'm trying to get as close as I can. I totally blew it on that heart one, but so if we're going to do light, can we also do darkness? Mm-hmm. Oh. Can't really see that yellow out there, can you? Oh, well. What else?
Well, at the top, moth, rust, and thieves.
Very good. Moth, rust, thieves. Moth, rust, thieves. All right, that's pretty good. Anything else?
Masters.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. Good connection, Julie. The 2 masters here that Jesus is speaking of, God and money. All right, that's pretty much what I marked. If there's something else that you're thinking of or you want me to mark, let me know. But I think those are the things primarily that we need to deal with in these. Now, what I want to do is I love doing this the way we do this on Wednesdays because it gives me a chance to sort of maybe give you tools in order to study things on your own. If you're looking at this, I mentioned this a minute ago. If you're looking at this, you could say, well, I can, generally speaking, I can understand what verses 19, 20, and 21 are saying. If you just had to lay it out there. Verse 24, you can kind of understand that, right? The middle one is the one that's hard. The eye being the lamp of the body. We don't speak that way. We don't talk like that. So that one's a little bit harder. Now, a couple of general principles for this are interpret hard passages by using easy passages that we can understand what they mean, and then take those to the hard ones and say, well, if this easy one means this, then the hard one should probably follow that to some degree. And we do that in Bible study and in trying to exegete the scriptures. We do that all over the place. But another general rule that goes along with that is to say, where is the same person talking, so that I can use that same person in the way they meant this to use that. In this particular case, this is the most easy and obvious way to apply those rules, and I want to show you why, because actually interpreting verses 22 and 23 are not nearly as hard as it might seem when you see what I'm going to show you with the words that are used here, okay? What I want to do is I want to do some definitions of some words, and I want to start with the word treasure or treasures in verses 19, 20, and 21. And then I want to connect that down to the word money in verse 24. Now, let's just start with that one for the sake of doing this, because then we'll work back to the other one and what it means. Now, I'm going to go to my app that I throw up here sometimes. It says Blue Letter Bible, if you don't know. Okay, there's verse 24 right in the middle. No one can serve two masters, for you either hate the one and love the other, or will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Now, if you've been around the church for any amount of time, you've heard somebody say, oh, that word there at the end of verse 24. Have you heard a sermon on this? Ron? No? Come on. If I had a nickel for every sermon I've heard on this, I'd have like 5 nickels. Yeah, that's true. Don't serve the nickels. Good point, Ron. Thank you for the reminder. The word that Jesus uses there is the word mammon. I can't blow this up. That's really unfortunate. You'll see there, outline of biblical usage. The way we transliterate that word is this word mammon. What you will then hear is all these definitions, all these understandings of this means material things and riches and power that goes along with it, and all those things, which is generally speaking kind of true. What I want you to see is, look at the very next word in the outline of biblical usage. Treasure. Have any of you ever heard verse 24 translated, you cannot serve both God and treasure? But that is precisely what Jesus is saying. Now you say, well, wait a minute. I thought the other verses said treasure, 19 through 21. Yeah, I agree, Ann. Here, this is an interesting word. This is kind of a fun word. If you like etymology like I do, this is a fun word. This is the word for treasure in verses 19, 20, and 21. And the word is thesaurus, from where we get our word thesaurus. A thesaurus is a treasure trove of words. But in this case, what this word means is more like something like a treasure chest. Like you might use the word, like if you look, I think it's, yeah, right there. A casket, coffer, or other receptacle in which valuables are kept. Now, look, I'm not trying to reinterpret the words that are used, and I'm not trying to write my own translation of the Bible here. But what I do think is, in studying the etymology of these words, you start to get the idea that Jesus is speaking of all of this in this entire section, verses 19 all the way through 24, about the same concept. In verses 19, 20, and 21, he's using the term for a treasure chest or a treasure coffer, a place where all these treasures are stored. In verse 24, he's referring to the treasure itself. Now, I want to talk about each one of these, but what I want you to see is, if he's talking about the same thing in verses 19, 20, and 21, that he is talking about in verse 24. Would everybody agree in general that's true? Based on those words and definitions of those words, everybody see what I'm saying? He's talking about the same concept, right? if he's talking about the same concept in those places, does it not then stand to reason that the two verses that are a little bit harder to understand here, right in the middle of this, he's still talking about the same thing? He's still talking about the same idea. This is where studying words is really, really important when it comes to studying the Bible, because it gives us a chance then to see an interpretation, not just specifically from the word or the phrase or even the verse that he's in, but the entire section and part that he's speaking of here. Let me just put this simply. Everything he says in these 6 verses all relate to the same concept. And so then when we go back to verses 22 and 23, which we will in a moment, I'll just say that again. He's talking about this exact same concept as he was in the other 2 parts, 19 through 21, and then verse 24. Okay, everybody with me on that? Good. Questions, thoughts, David? Oh boy. You want to let your wife go first?
Yes. Well, I was just, my first thought is, in the first section, 19 through 21, he is saying that you can serve both God and money. I mean, he is saying that you can serve both God and treasure because you're laying up treasures in heaven. Whereas in the second part, he's saying you can't because they're divided. So that's my question.
Okay.
Is how do you reconcile that?
Yeah. Give me 20 minutes. I think there's actually a simple answer for that, but I want to parse out the words a little bit, only because I don't want to give the answer and then have to go back and justify it. I'd rather show it and then give the answer if that's okay. Yeah, I think it'll make sense when I do. Katie, go ahead.
Well, I think you already answered it actually. But,
I thought I didn't give any answer.
Well, isn't the answer that what you're talking about, the description of the 2 different words, where the ones on the top are not necessarily talking about money, they're talking about where you store what you care about, or your treasure.
Yeah. Yeah, sort of. Let's go through the words. I think it'll make sense what I'm going to say. I didn't realize what time it was. I'll go quick, I promise. Jose, go ahead, and then Katie again.
So how do I lay up treasures in heaven?
I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
Okay, so what I was originally going to say is, when I was reading this week's section, what I kept coming back to is the laying up treasures on earth and laying up treasures in heaven. When I got down to you cannot serve God and money, every time the word money kind of slapped me in the face, because I wasn't really thinking of that. And I think part of the reason is because it's after the huge section about doing things in secret, where your father will reward you.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a very direct parallel to, like, doing things for the praise of men here on earth and you get your reward now, versus doing things in secret where your father will reward you. And I sort of assume not now, and it just seemed like a treasures on earth versus treasures in heaven.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say, the thing I wrote down that I think this entire section is about is addressing that very same concept that he's referring to. The whole idea of praying in secret versus praying for the praise of men relates directly to what he's talking about here, as far as treasures on earth and treasures in heaven. I think it's impossible to separate all of it. Maybe I just say it this way. I don't think within the course of what we know as chapter 6, as part of this sermon, he completely changes direction, is talking about something different here. That same thread weaves its way through the entire Sermon on the Mount, I think. So I'm totally with you on that. Anybody else? Where we going? All right, let's look at verses 19 through 21, and I'll try to answer some of those questions here first. All right. The first thing I want to say is, if you look at these words, moth, rust, and thieves, we have at least somewhat of a physical understanding of what he's getting at there, right? Like we understand that moths will eat things if you leave them in storage. We understand that things left on their own with water will corrode and rust. If we understand that in a physical sense, thieves can come in and take them. But if you just then look at those exact same words in the context of verse 20, we recognize that the way he says that in verse 20 would indicate he's using illustrative language to speak of a concept of which is not really a material thing at all. Instead, it's a concept and an idea of which he is just simply trying to get them to understand. Okay? Meaning, I don't know if there's moths in heaven or not. I sort of hope not. But the point being is, I don't think there's moths going around heaven eating our clothes, or thieves, or rust. That's not really a part of the equation and the economy of what heaven is. By the way, we're going to be talking about heaven on Sunday. Instead, what he's trying to say is you want to store up that which you value, your treasure, and the storehouse of that, in a place that's not this world. Now, just to relate that a little bit, so let's just make sure this is clear, okay, before I go on from this. Okay, treasures, these are stored up things of value, is the way that word sort of translates, right? A treasure chest. So yes, it's true, Katie, he's talking about the chest, the treasure chest here rather than the treasure itself. But the whole idea is this is a coffer or a thing full of all the things you value. Here he says, put all the things that are stored up that you value, make them be what? Heavenly, eternal, not earthly and temporal and material. The illustrative language would give the indication or the suggestion that he's not using explicit, direct language or rhetoric here. He's using analogous or illustrative language to make his point. Okay? Which is why then he can say, where the place of the stored up things that you value truly is, that's where your heart is. Meaning that's what you're going to chase after. Wherever you place value on things and wherever you have this desire for things, that's what you're going to go for. And so he's challenging them to say, where do you place the most value? Again, this is why, Katie, now this is why I think he's dealing with the same thing. If you place the most value on the praise of men, you're going to go seek the praise of men. If you seek the most value on being known by God and him knowing you, you're not going to do that for the praise of men, and you're not going to pray on the street corners. You're going to pray in secret. If you place the most value on being recognized for every act of service you do, and making sure everybody knows what a philanthropist you are and how much you help the homeless and the sick and the needy and the pregnancy center and all those things, you will seek the praise of men for those things. Or you can do those things in secret because it is what God commands for you to do so that he knows you and you know him. Where your treasure is, that's what your heart's going to pursue. Fair enough? Again, I don't think that one's super hard for us to grasp. He explains it. Jose, to answer your question then, how do you lay up treasures in heaven? The whole idea here is not so much about laying up treasures in a specific sense. I'm not picking on you, but just hear me when I say this. Like, we ask that question, and we all do. We ask that question that you're asking because immediately our mind thinks of, how can I have a storehouse in heaven then? And that's precisely the opposite of what Jesus is trying to say here. He's saying, what things do you value? What things does your heart most desire? That's your treasure. That's where your heart goes. Okay, make sense? All right, now let's look at the last one then, verse 24.
Can I ask you
Of course,
clarifying?
of course.
Did you just say that it's not possible to lay up treasures in heaven because there's no, like,
What I'm saying is the point is that if we are striving for heavenly reward in that sense, it's sort of missing the point of what Jesus is saying. Like this is like you probably not, maybe you've heard me say this or not, like the whole point of like pursuing a crown of glory when like Paul mentions and talks about that kind of stuff. The whole point is that like we seek to do those things because we seek to earn them, and we like, oh, my crown's going to be bigger than David's, right? My crown's going to be the biggest in heaven because, and then I list all the things to make my crown the biggest. And the whole idea here is that Jesus is simply dealing with the matter of the heart and saying, are you doing this for recognition? Or are you doing this for the service and act of your Father, which is the same thing that he's been dealing with all along? That's why I don't think we can divorce this from the rest of the Sermon on the Mount that he gives. The whole conversation about crowns in heaven and treasures in heaven and what that really looks like, that's a different conversation, maybe a little bit. I'll just say I probably have a different take on that than almost every other evangelical person you've ever talked to about that, in that I do not think those are speaking of literal heavenly rewards, at least not in the sense that we think of them. I think there's a heavenly economy of how all those things work. I just think it's a little further beyond our grasp than us trying to take material understandings of those things and then place them into heaven, and that's how things are going to work. That's how I at least interpret all that. Joy, go ahead.
You answered it. No. Okay.
What did I say?
I was talking, that's why I was asking about the rewards, because it says that in the beginning.
Yeah.
The Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
For your Father in heaven will reward you. Your Father in heaven will reward you. I mean, it's
yeah, and so we take our human economy of those things and we place it into the heavenly economy and we say, oh, that's how it's going to work. And I'm just not sure that's exactly, we have a right understanding of that, that's all. Yeah.
Well, if we keep thinking we're just going to get stuff, that's just like more materialism, only you're just putting it in the veneer of spiritual. Like
correct. That's 100% how I've always heard it explained. It is material, heavenly, fleeting stuff put on with a heavenly veneer and made it sound exactly the same. We're going to talk more about this on Sunday, I promise, what heaven would be like. But I'll just say the whole point here is for our hearts not to be seeking that which we can earn and that which brings us the greatest reward. But the whole idea of a storehouse of treasure in heaven is the whole idea is that God is the ultimate reward, and in his presence and eternity with him is the reward for which we seek. That's how I would define the stored up things of value in heaven. Eternal presence with the holy God who has made us holy and able to be in his presence forever. Yeah. All right, let's do the last verse. If you have more questions, bring them up. It's perfectly fine. That's why we do this. So Jesus says nobody could serve two masters. You're either going to hate the one or love the other, or devote to the one, despise the other. He says you cannot serve God and treasure. Now, maybe this is where that question you asked earlier, it seems like he's contradicting himself from the first three verses and then in the last verse. If you say you cannot serve God and serve the rewards that you get from God, right? Or the rewards you get for doing good things, if you define it that way, then it starts to make a little bit more sense, at least it does to me. You're either going to serve God and God alone for God's glory alone because he is worthy of glory alone and worthy to be served and praised, or you're going to serve that which benefits you. That's really the idea of treasure or mammon. This word doesn't really mean riches, although it kind of does. It doesn't really mean material things, although it kind of does. It doesn't really mean wealth, although it kind of does. It's kind of all of those things all wrapped into one. These are all material enrichment to some degree. And Jesus is saying, you can't serve both. You're going to hate one and love the other, or vice versa. You either can have God or you can have treasure. You can't have both things because you won't want both things. Okay? That one's pretty straightforward, is it not? Questions on that one? Thoughts on that one? Kurt?
Is God not the treasure?
Well, yes, but now we're like playing with words, and he's trying to use material things that they understood,
Yeah.
right?
That they are replacing God with.
Correct.
The things that God provides, they're looking to from a different source.
100%. And look, the whole point of the whole thing is God is the ultimate treasure. That is true. He just doesn't say it that way because it would be semantically hard to say, right? Like we say it that way. They wouldn't have said it that way. He would say you can either serve the things that enrich you, that you can earn, that are material important to you, or you can serve God. You can love God or you can love things. It's not going to work to love both.
And by serving treasure on earth, this is an attempt to acquire it on our own merit, or is this something that we're just envying from a distance? You know what I mean? There's having and not having and desiring.
Yeah.
And there's different drives and motivations, I think, from both angles on that.
Well, I mean, that's where I think there's a couple of words in here that are really important. One is the word serve here. The other one is love, despise, devoted to. But then the other one is here, Kurt, in verse 21, the same idea of treasure, which, by the way, this word treasure here is the same as this word. It's not the same as the one in verse 24. But what he's saying is where you have stored up things of value, that's where your heart is. To use the language of verse 24, that's where your love is. That's where your devotion is. You can either love and be devoted to the treasure, or you can love and be devoted to God. And I think the way I would say this is, it's not so much necessarily the physical things that he's referring to here, as much as it is like earning them in that sense, as much as it is just the things themselves. Joy, you want to say something?
Yeah, well, would it be the concept of idols?
Yes, I definitely think idols could be part of this. The only reason I'm hesitating at all is because usually idols, then we would associate a little bit more with the idea of worship. And certainly I think you could make the case, but you're having to make the case and draw the lines to it rather than actually using that word. Whereas here, Jesus is simply saying you're subservient to, devoted to, and loving treasure, or you're subservient to, devoted to, and loving God. All right, Kurt, you want to say something else? Go ahead.
Yeah, it goes into whenever else because you're not doing this next week, so whenever else we continue, there's more verses that come after this section that I think apply here. Kind of what Joy is saying about idols, but it is the God providing aspect of things, which he goes into with the next verses.
Yeah, I read it, and I wanted to talk about that at the end, but we can just talk about it now. It's perfectly fine. The whole next section, Jesus says, don't be anxious. Don't worry about what you're going to have, where you're going to get it from, how you're going to get it. Don't worry about those things.
Which is all the serving of money. Because I'm worrying about it. How is this going to happen? Unless I worry about it and do something. Unless I work hard and make more.
Yes. The only word I would have changed in there is all about money. Money is simply just one part of that larger picture of treasure that I think he's using here.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, it's in my mind very much a not relying on God thing that he's getting to.
Yeah.
And the more money you have, the harder it is to rely on God, because you can see how it goes from point A to point B and how I did it all. I earned that, and I accomplished this for myself.
Yeah.
Right? And so you just get so ingrained with self-provision, and you get removed from God's provision.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a very, very good way of saying it. Very good. Anything else on those parts? I'm moving quickly, but I want to make sure we get to this last part. All right, so let's talk about 22 and 23. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Now, I said it earlier, we don't talk like this. This is admittedly sort of weird speech as far as we're concerned, which is okay. It just means they spoke differently than we do, at least in sort of maybe what we would call like colloquialisms, which is what this is. To a first century Jewish young man, they would have said, oh yeah, I get that. You get what he's saying? We just don't talk like this.
It's the heart.
What?
It's like your heart. Like the eye is like representative of like your heart.
Okay. Close.
It's not your eye is like the gatekeeper of what gets to your heart.
You hear that?
Yeah.
So the reason why I was hesitating is because it's not that the eye and the heart are equatable. It's your eye is literally what are you letting in? And the reason why this is, I love this part only because I love saying to you what I'm about to say to you, because you all hear it about every other week, if not every week. What you let into your eye in this sense is what goes into your brain, your mind,
What you think about,
and what you think about then affects
what you want, what you desire.
what you believe, and then what you desire, and then what you do. Have you heard that formula before, Mark?
No.
I think so.
Not this week.
Here's what Eve did.
What?
Eve,
Oh,
Eve saw that the fruit was good, and she perceived something from it,
yep. Yeah.
and did it.
Yeah.
But also, there's two types of eyes there. One is bad. Is it talking about spiritual eye?
Because you're saying one eye is healthy,
And one is bad.
one eye is bad? Yeah.
The first couple of verses dealt with the focus of your life. These deal with the priority of your pursuit.
Yeah. Say that. Hold on. I want you to say that last word again. It's so very important. The priority of your pursuit. So the eye is not just what's going in, but what you're looking at and for is what's being communicated here. I think pursuit is the right word there, Scott.
That way you focus the eye.
Very good. Can I just write that question down? I think that's good. Where do you focus your eyes? This is a really good one. This is sort of simple when you break it down this way too, because just ask yourself personally, but then ask yourself about people whom you respect and that you know pursue good things, and say, what do they look for? What do they go after? What do their eyes seek? And you look, he's using the term "I" here, but we could say that in like, what do they listen to? Right? Like, the whole idea here is this sensory thing that he's using just as an analogy. What do we pursue? That word that Scott used, pursuit. What is the pursuit of your eyes? What is the pursuit of your mind? And what Jesus is saying here is what you pursue, it's a revealer. It's a lamp of your body. It shows where your heart is going. And if that light within you is darkness, which is a weird way of saying that, but that's the way he says it, how great is the darkness that's in you if your eyes and your life are pursuing dark things rather than good, light, heavenly things, eternal things. Any more questions on that one? Now, if you back off from this, if a question comes up, just raise your hand. If you back off from this, and you don't have to do it this way, but what I did is I took each of the 3 sections and I said, what's the lesson from each one? And then said, how do I put the lessons together from all 3? And what you'll find is there is a resounding theme that works its way through this entire part. And this is why I can say I don't necessarily think this is really about heavenly rewards, at least in the sense that we often talk about that. This is about Jesus saying, in the deepest parts of you, from your heart's desires working all the way outward, do you seek that which is material and fleeting? Things like moth and rust and thieves can destroy it. Do you seek things that are dark and evil? Or do you seek things that are of God, from God, and are eternally part of who God is? The sort of individual lesson that each one of these sections have all speak to that same larger idea. All 6 verses working in tandem and all speaking to the same idea, and Jesus making the entire point from this from all 3 different ways of saying it. If your treasure's on earth, you'll pursue things on earth. If your treasure's on heaven, that's where your heart's going to be and go after and pursue. Your eyes are going to pursue, and your heart and your mind is going to pursue that which you focus on and what you desire. And if those are dark things, you're going to be full of darkness. And if those are things of the light, you're going to be full of light. Because you can't serve both. You can't serve both things. And so now you start to think about, like, well, what does that mean? What does it mean that you can't serve God and treasure on earth? You can't serve God and this self-serving thing. The whole idea is you can't be self-serving and serve the kingdom at the same time, which is the entire point of the Sermon on the Mount. The entire Sermon on the Mount is a self-defeating type of idea that I must become less and he must become greater. That my eyes must be focused heavenward and not on earthly things, not on myself and the praise of men and all these different things that Jesus addresses. Go all the way back to the Beatitudes. Every single one of those things that he lists out is a denial of earthly gain. Instead, it's heaven's desire. God's desire for us in our lives. Joy?
Well, like about living in that eternal perspective where everything that we do is either eternal or temporal. Everything that we think is either eternal or temporal. Where, the psalmist says, help me to number my days.
Yeah.
And, and then what if you gain the whole world but, forfeit your soul? In that sense as well, too, that, it's having that mind forward that we can, easily be taken with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime. And so what do we have to show? What is all the material things that we left behind, what are the eternal consequences of any of that stuff?
Yeah. I want to think about that right way. Like let me just give some good quotes speaking to that. Like, only one life soon will be past, only what's done for Christ will last, right? Like, that's the right idea. On the other hand, even that to some degree speaks of the sense of us earning and laboring to earn in some sense. And listen, I want to burn out for Christ. I understand that idea, and I think we should have that heart that with what God gives us, we serve Him with everything we can. But on the other hand, we have to not do that because it earns us something. And the more that we have that mindset of, okay, well, I'm going to be heavenly minded, so therefore I'm going to do all these things so that we've already missed the point.
Yeah, isn't there that we're so earthly minded, we so heavenly minded, not earthly?
No earthly good, that's right. But the other part about that is, and this is what I was thinking of too, Joy, is, I wrote this down earlier, is there's a sense in which we can take these words of Jesus here to the extreme, and you somewhere end up in this idea of asceticism, which is a denial of anything good in the material world. And like asceticism in its severest degree are people like, monks who live up in the mountains and they have nothing, own nothing, nothing. I just don't see that being what God designed for us either. I mean, I'm not quite a Christian hedonist, as Piper would call himself, although I do understand the term. The whole idea is hedonism is just simply like seeking enjoyment and pleasure in everything. Like the whole purpose of life is happiness. Well, Piper's version of that is Christian hedonism is like, I can enjoy all things because God made all things. And that is drawn from the idea of, Paul's words, like, all things were created by God for good, right? We corrupt things with sin, and that's kind of what Paul is getting at there. But the whole point is that God has given us so many good things in the material creation, and we're supposed to enjoy them. The point of this is not to deny all material things. The point of this is not to say that you can't have things and you can't even have riches. I mean, look, if you look at the makeup of the early church and the church in the first few centuries, it was people from the most wealthy to the least wealthy and everybody in between that made up the backbone of what the church became. So the point is not really that either. The point is what is our focus? And look, not even our focus of what we are laboring for. That's not the point. The point is where is our hope? Where is our desire? Where is everything that is our heart and mind's total focus? Where does that lie? In riches and in treasure and in treasure troves on earth or in heaven? Go ahead, Dennis.
I was looking up the phrase, he will be devoted to one. And that word is, that phrase is like what you hold fast to.
Yeah.
It's like, are you holding fast to your treasures? Are you holding fast to your ability to make a lot of money or whatever?
Yeah.
Are you holding fast to God?
Yeah.
Because it still seems, when you hear it that way, it really does sound like you really are, if you're holding fast to something, I mean, you're devoted to that thing.
Yeah.
It's like an idol. I mean,
Yeah.
It's kind of like an idol.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll talk about this in the next section, but it's important to mention now, like, this doesn't obviate the need for working hard.
No.
This doesn't obviate the need for saving money. Like, none of that is denied by this. Those are all good and godly principles. What this is talking about simply is the focus of our heart. That is why this all goes together with what we do for the praise of men versus what we do in secret. What we do for a treasure in heaven versus what we do for a treasure on earth. All these things go together that way. Any last thoughts, comments, questions, Marky?
I was just thinking about, so Jesus told all these topics to these folks in one sitting.
Yeah.
That's just a lot to take in.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they had their notebooks and their pens there, and they were, yeah.
They probably use the correct color.
Yeah, I mean, if they had the right marks on there, you know, I mean, I'm sure he gave out a study guide before he gave the sermon, right?
QR code, they all just took a picture.
As a matter of fact, I bet he handed out booklets that were just the plain text, and then the ones that had the nice drawings in them, like we did before we did Ephesians.
And then his secretary added a page later.
The one they forgot to add. Yeah, you know, let me just say, it certainly is a lot, the things that he talked about there. I think also, we could say with some certainty, this wasn't the only time and place he taught about these very things, because we know even Luke records part of the Sermon on the Mount in a couple places. So either you have to say Luke got it out of order and he grabbed some of these things and put them differently, or this was this one great and monumental sermon of which the Holy Spirit then brought to mind to Matthew to record. And also, Jesus taught these things continually on a regular basis, such that not only did Matthew record this one sermon, but that Luke was able to record, you know, through Paul probably and through the other apostles, different parts of this over time. I think I would say it, Mark, he taught this stuff a lot. A lot. The primary principles of the kingdom. It's really good. It's a great sermon, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, anything else? Speaking of great sermons, as Providence would have it, I gave you all a little homework on Sunday. Remember what it was?
To read Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God.
And
to listen to a sermon by,
H.B. Charles.
yes.
H.B. Charles preached at Southern Seminary yesterday in chapel. So you could go right on SBTS's YouTube page and watch H.B.'s sermons. Very good. And at the same time I was giving you that homework, James and Joy were in Springfield, as Providence would have it, picking up booklets that have the entire sermon by Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God.
They went all the way to Springfield for that?
Yeah. Well, it's the closest place.
Providentially.
Anyway, there are several of these that Joy brought back. There's maybe 8 or 10 out there, maybe. I put these in the lobby where you will find Reformation resources that we put out for this week that are going to be out there for the next several weeks. There's books and booklets and a whole bunch of stuff out there for everybody to have. I will say, I'm going to mention this on Sunday, there's a red book out there, Why the Reformation Matters. Is that the name of that one? Why did no, that's the other book. Why did the Reformation have to happen, or something like that? It's a red book by Sproul. I bought enough that every family should be able to have one, and I want everybody to have that and read it. Very, very important booklet. But these will be out there with those books on that table, okay? All right, thanks everybody. Let's pray, and then we'll be out of here. Father, thanks for this time to be together tonight. Thanks so much for the food that you provided. Thanks so much for the food of your word that you provided for us as well. And I pray that as we go forth now with full stomachs and full hearts and full minds, Father, that you would bless us this evening. Help us to remember all these things that we've studied, that we might remember them and that we might grow in them. Father, bless us with safety this week. We look forward to being together on Sunday. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, everybody. God bless you.